Hi, I'm Nick Mendolia with Visual South. In this overview, we're just going to cover some of the manufacturing and operations functionality available to you in Infor VISUAL ERP. Let's get started by looking at some of the more important functionality in the manufacturing and operations area of Infor VISUAL ERP. In this overview, we want to focus on the manufacturing aspects of Infor VISUAL ERP. We want to look at an estimate and how that estimate converts to a sales order, how we can look at the best date available at the time of taking sales order due to our scheduling and planning functionality. We want to look at the work orders that are producing items for that sales order. And of course the manufacturing process, which we will go into our shop floor mobile functionality to show how easy it is to perform transactions such as labor and material transactions for the folks on the floor, which we feel is probably the most important part of an ERP system that often gets overlooked. So I'm going to use my graphical menu to go through the different parts of the system here, and we're only going to cover a few of these areas to keep it short. Starting with sales, we really want to start at the estimating window and see how we produce an estimate. And this is really just one way. There are several ways we could do estimates, including quick quotes. But generally, an estimate, and we'll use estimate 3000 as our example here. We have a part that's coming in. We already have an engineering master for this part, but even if it didn't have a master, it's just a matter of building a quote master in the background. But we're going to cost it from our engineering master, and we're telling it that the customer or prospect is asking for quotes for quantities of 10, 50, 100, 500, and 1000. And of course the estimating window will calculate for us prices for those, because when you have setup times and things such as that, obviously the higher quantity is going to produce a lower price because you're going to accumulate that setup cost over a larger number of items. But generally, we do have these view panels, which give us information about what we're looking at on the screen. So I'm looking at a part view panel over here on the left, which gives me information since we are quoting an actual stock item that we already have. If this was a new item that we were quoting, we wouldn't even need to have a part number to estimate it. But if we were creating a part number first to estimate it, we would obviously have zeros in all of this. But since this is an existing item, it allows me to easily see while I'm doing the estimate, do I have any on hand, and how many are in demand, and how many are available to me. So it gives me some good information here if I'm trying to turn this quote around quickly to offer to a customer or prospect. Over on the right side, I see information if this is a customer. It doesn't have to be. I can do an estimate for a prospect that is not in my customer database, in which case I wouldn't have any data here either, since it's not really a customer yet. But if it is a customer, I can also see what their credit information is if I wanted to, and see if they're in good standing before supplying the estimate, or let them know that they're not in good standing when I supply the estimate. So when I'm doing this, what we would do is look at our engineering master, or it could be a quote master. They would be produced the same way, but what we're really doing here is looking at this graphically, and this is where we get the name visual from. We're looking at a visual representation of a bill of material and a routing all in one area. So by looking at this, it's very easy for me to see that here is my main assembly, or my main product, or my finished good. This is my finished good part number. Everything in yellow are materials, and in blue, or in light blue, are my operations, or my routing that produces that particular thing. So my cutoff saw uses this 1/8 inch flat stock, then it goes to the brake, the drill, the grind, and so on. And then you can see here I need a bearing at the assembly operation, and the bearing is actually associated to that particular operation, so I know that I don't need the bearing in the beginning. And Visual knows when it schedules that it doesn't need it in the beginning, so it won't create a constraint on the material knowing that it doesn't have it, because it might say, well, it's going to take you 2 or 3 days to do all of this, so you don't need that bearing for 2 or 3 days. Looking over here on the right side, I can see what we call legs, and each one of these subheaders is a subassembly. So I can tell just by looking at this right off the bat that I have a main assembly and 2 subassemblies that go into this welding operation, because that's where that leg comes off from. So very easy to see how this is structured. I can also double click on these. So I double clicked on my material card so I can see the information about that particular flat stock. It shows me that, you know, I have a quantity per of 10. I could put scrap and fixed quantity in there, and the system will calculate that for me when it goes through its material planning if I wanted to. I can double click on an operation card, and this shows me the setup hours, the run time, the type of run, whether it's hours per piece, pieces per hour, and so on. And also any work instruction that will print out on my traveler that goes out to the floor with this job eventually. But in the end, we're really capturing at the quote level all of this time that goes into all of these different operations. They all have different setup time and different run time, and we're capturing the cost of these materials, and that's what's generating that cost at the quote level. Okay, so back at my quote, I can evaluate the costs that were generated from all that material, labor, burden, and service that was all associated with those labor and material cards. There could also be outside service cards that were in there too, that it captures the cost of that to a vendor. And it's calculating all of that up for me and applying the margins that I set for it when I did the estimate here. And then of course I can run my calculator to generate the costs based on the markups that I choose down here on the bottom. I can have a default markup, and then I can manually change these and recalculate to get what I want my quoted unit price to be on my quote. And now we're going to convert that estimate into a sales order. We've actually already done that, so we'll just quickly show how easy it was to do it. In my order entry screen, all we had to do was come over to our edit button and generate order from quote and choose that quote number 3000. I'm not going to do it here, but copy that in. It would show me all the lines on here, and then I would choose which quantity the customer chose, so it would know which price to get from that quote to bring it in. I can also choose create work orders also, since I have the ability at this point of creating a sales order to actually create, since I already have the engineering master to produce that item. I can tell it to go ahead and create those work orders, so we're not waiting for planning or somebody in scheduling to create the order. It's being done immediately at order entry. So we're just going to pull in that same thing, and we use the same order number 3000. And you can see the customer ordered the A8000 part. They ordered 10 at a price of $750. You can see I do have these view panels also that come up again for me, which give me more information. I can see that the credit limit for the customer, which I saw at the estimate stage. And then I can also see some more information over here on the right related to the item as it starts getting produced, and being able to track production cost and gross profit as the WIP process happens. And this is a job that's actually already in process, as we're going to show in a little while as our example. But looking at our order line, we can see that this particular order has a work order allocated to it. So we're building that job specifically for this customer order, as opposed to building it to stock and shipping it from stock. I can see the job right here. It's job number 3000. We're keeping things easy. It doesn't have to be the same number. It would auto-generate whatever the next number is. But I can see information about that, and the nice thing here is I can go right into that job ID by clicking on my button here. That's a quick drill down to take me to that work order. We'll go into that in a little while. What I want to do first is just explain how we set up a part and the different information that we can set up with a part ID. So I'm just going to drill into that part ID number. So this is the part master. And once again, we do have that view panel to see information specific to this part. But we can attach a picture. We can also attach documents to this. We have document references. We can drag and drop documents into it, which will attach it to this and follow it wherever it goes. So if we have a document associated to this item and we want it to copy to the customer order and be able to print out and send to the customer with an acknowledgement, or perhaps the invoice later on, we can do that. But here's where we just identify what it is, if it's fabricated or purchased. We can do tools and fixtures also, which comes in handy when we start doing planning and scheduling. We can see the costs that were brought in from that master that we saw earlier with the operations and bills of material. So it captured all of that and brought that in here so we could see what that total cost of the item is. But importantly here, what I want to show is planning. So here's where we can identify what type of order policy we want. Discrete basically means we want the MRP system to go out and plan one for one. So every time it sees it needs this, plan an order for it. I can do period supply, which says, hey, if I need this, also look X amount of days that I tell it into the future to see if there's any other demand for that item that I should also combine into a single order rather than creating separate orders along the way. And then I have some other options here, but we'll talk about those later. Master schedule being more of a forecast type situation where you want to tell it, I want to make this amount on these days. Min-max order quantities, multiples of whatever rules we put in there as the MRP process runs. It's going to generate planned orders for us and abide by those rules. So if we say we'd always order these in a minimum of 100 and we only need 10, it's going to tell us to make 100. We can override that, of course, but we're telling the system to do what we would normally do so that we have to do less work to manipulate any of it. We want to just be able to say, yep, that's what I would do, click the button and hit order. And then we also have a link to our engineering master ID. If I jump over to that, this is what we were looking at earlier that we used at the quoting process. Which again, a quote master would look just like this, except instead of an M meaning master, I would have a Q to identify that. If this was a work order, I would see a work order base ID here. So, but the structure would look the same. And as an example, because this particular one happens to be a job that we do have a work order for, we can see what it looks like as a master when it gets copied to a work order. It would look like this. So now you can see a difference here. Now we have some different colors going on. And again, this is why we call it visual. I can see now that this yellow card, which was our material, has a blue bar all the way across it. That indicates that that material was issued in full. These operations have labor tickets applied to them in full because they go all the way across, and then when we get down to our drill, I can see that that's only about halfway done because the status symbol or the status bar only goes about halfway across. I can see exactly what that is if I wanted to by going to my labor tickets, and I can see all of the labor tickets that have been applied to this. And if I wanted to see all the specific labor tickets for one operation like this drill, for instance, I can just click on that and now I can see all the labor that has been applied to that drill operation. Same thing with my sub-assemblies. I can see my sub-assemblies are about, maybe this one's 50%, this one's about 30% or 25%, and the materials are not fully issued yet. So, from a visual standpoint, if I want to know what's going on with this full assembly, I can see that just by looking at this screen. I know exactly what's going on with this particular work order. Another nice feature here are these red outlines that I see. What that red outline indicates is that there is actually an open labor ticket currently out there for that operation. So I can tell by looking at this entire order that somebody's clocked on right now working on this saw operation and someone's clocked in on this shear operation. And the reason some are bold and some are not is because that is the determinant path, meaning that's what determines the length of the schedule or the length of the job through the schedule. So this one really is the longer running sub-assembly, which is determining when it actually starts at the weld area. So again, looking at the difference, work order and master. You can see how visually I can see that they're the same, and one is a work order that's in production. So it's again, very visual and very easy to see. Now, another great feature we have here is the ability to see what the costs are. So this is a running list of real-time costs for this particular job. So I can see my estimated costs over here highlighted all in white. So my estimated the unit cost, my material, labor, burden, and service. And then my actual cost. There's actual labor tickets and material receipts and material issues being done. So it's capturing all of the actual cost. And this is regardless of whether you do an actual cost or standard cost in a system, or average cost for that matter. It's going to capture actual at any given time versus what you said the standard was no matter what. So I can track what those variances are. And the nice thing about this is I'm seeing this as the job is in production, and I'm seeing a projected cost. So I can look at my projected cost. In this case, it's $53.91 versus my estimated cost, $52.89. So I can tell, even though this job is not even done yet, it's in process, that my projected cost is going to be high. So I have the ability to maybe do something about it to try to make up for that lost cost. And then I can evaluate, where those variances are happening. In these in the cutoff saw, and the material was slightly different cost than what I estimated the standard cost to be, and then my brake department. So that's a great way to evaluate how the job is doing and try to do something about it while it's in process, as opposed to waiting till it's done and then figuring out why it went wrong. So going back to our part master, or part maintenance, which is where we went to that work order from, or that engineering master from, and then we showed the work order. One of the things I wanted to show here, because it's kind of pervasive throughout the system, but the part maintenance form is a nice place to show what you can do here. So if I go on my search query button next to my part, I have full capability of choosing which columns in my part table I want to display here. So here's where I can start to personalize, whether it's for me as an individual or for everybody. But I can pick and choose which columns I want to show, because I can search on these columns. So if these are the columns that I wish to search on, I can use that, as an example here. A nice search that I might want to do is perhaps I want to find everything where my quantity on hand is less than 0. Go find all of my negative inventory, and then I have a quick report, because I can take this and then shoot it right out to Excel, and that's a negative on hand report that I can go bring out to or maybe I am the inventory guy, and that's just a report that I want to run on a regular basis to fix my negative inventory. We can certainly set the system up so that it doesn't allow negative inventory, but we've found in most cases that negative inventory really is a necessary evil. And the reality is that it should not stay in there for more than a day. So for instance, a purchase receipt comes in and it has to go right to a hot job and get produced, but we didn't do the actual receipt yet. But that receipt should happen sometime throughout that day. It shouldn't be forgotten or not done at all. And this is where we would capture it and make sure that it's that it does happen and take place, and make sure we clear out all of our negatives at the end of each day or the beginning of the following day. But a great way to use that. And whenever I create a query like that, a filter like that, I can save that that filter. So I have the ability to create a profile for it and give it a name. I can create it, and I might say save as and just call it neg inventory. And then the next time I come in here, instead of having to filter and do that, I would just open up that profile and run it, and it would give me that. And I can create a whole bunch of those. So depending on how I want to slice and dice all of my part data, I can create a bunch of ad hoc reports just using this query window to do that. The other great thing about it is that, let's say I was using my product code as a column. I don't have it on this particular example, but if I added my product code to here and I wanted to change my product codes for some items, I can export this to Excel, make those changes in Excel, and then import it back in and then save it. And it will update my database from Excel. It will make sure that I don't violate any of the rules of the system by doing that. You know, and product code's probably a bad example because it might bark at you for having, you know, some jobs that are already using the product code that are open or something of that sort. But I can add new parts, so I can go out and, you know, export this out and use that same format to add new parts to the table instead of coming in and entering parts one by one. I could do it all in Excel and you know, be happy doing as much work as I can in Excel. Get that done and then import it all back into the table here. And of course, I'm showing this at the part level, but I can do that for customers, vendors, and you know, lots of other places within the Visual ERP system. Okay, I'm going to close that. And just to highlight one other feature that I find very helpful in Visual is, as a report writer or anybody that's mining data within the database, the hardest part really is knowing where the data is and what it's called. Visual makes that easy. For example, let's say I'm looking at what this burden field is. I want to write a report that's calculating burden for some reason. I have this icon up top to display database source. I just click on that. I get a little question mark next to my my cursor, and if I point at the field and click in it, you can see down at the bottom it lets me know where the data is. So it's coming from the part site table, and the field is the unit service cost. So very easy to find where that data is without having to hunt through a data dictionary or anything like that. So very helpful when you're doing report writing. What I wanted to also show here is how we can get a best date available at order entry. So this particular one we copied from the estimate, and when we copied it, we had it automatically create that job order, and that job is already out there and in production. But let's say that the customer wants to place an order for us, and it's not coming from an estimate. So by putting that part number in and then giving it a quantity, let's say 5 as an example, and I'll give it a ship date, and let's say they want this on, and if I hit my space bar I can get a little calendar here. Let's say they want it on the 7th, tomorrow. Today is 10/6. So just by doing that, what I have the ability to do before I even save it is, if I highlight this line, I can then come up to my schedule availability. So this pulls up and it inputs my 10/7 want date, my quantity of 5, and I do want to check material, because if it uses raw materials, I want to make sure that those materials are in and available, because if they're not, then I certainly can't make this part. So what it's going to do is bang it against the existing schedule and see if it could fit that engineering master, once it turns into a work order, into the schedule to be completed by 10/7 based on current capacity and material availability. So I just hit my schedule button, and it comes back and lets me know that, well, no, you certainly can't. You can do it by 12/11, which is way past the 10/7. So it lets me know that I have a lot of capacity and constraint material issues, and I can do an audit and see what is actually causing it to be that late. And you know, I know in my demo database it's really constraints on my operations or my resources, because I never finish jobs in my demo database. So that's what's causing it to be pushed out. But this is great information, because while I'm on the phone with the customer and taking the order, I can let them know that, hey, I can't do it on that date. Here's when I can do it. And normally, hopefully, you know, in your situation, it's not that far apart. But being able to make a promise you can keep at order entry is a huge advantage that you can have within Visual. Okay, so the next thing we're going to highlight is material planning and scheduling. Generally, you would set these up to run on a schedule overnight, or you can run them manually throughout the day if you needed to for some reason, but generally it runs on a schedule overnight. Looking at the planning aspect of it first before we go into scheduling, we'll start off in our material planning window. And we're looking at the material planning window in date buckets at this point because I want to look at things at a global level. I could certainly switch my view to look at things in a part-by-part view, and it'll show me all of the dates for a specific part. But here I'm leaving my part empty, and I want to just search for a date bucket. And in this scenario, these date buckets represent the release date of a planned order. So planning and scheduling runs. The system figures out that, hey, in order to get this material when it's needed, you take the due date less the lead time, and it comes up with a release date. And what we're saying is everything from 10/2 to 10/8 would be in this 10/8 bucket. And you could define what you want these times to be. I set mine up to be 7 days, but you could do 5 days, you could do 2 weeks, a month, whatever you want these buckets to be. And actually, you can change them depending on where they are in the calendar. But here I'm just going to choose my 10/8 bucket, show me everything that I should be releasing today and this week as an example. And then I just click my Firm Release Planned Order button. And I'm just going to expand that window. And this basically pulls back all of my fabricated and purchased planned orders, meaning this is everything. It's basically a to-do list. Everything that the system says is needed, you have demand for, but you have no current supply for, you need to do something. And that demand could be, on the purchased side, the demand could be a work order, or it could be a higher level planned order, even, because planning and MRP drives through every level of a bill of material all the way down. So even the next level up could be another planned order. And from a work order standpoint or a fabrication standpoint, the demand could be a customer order, or it could be a parent manufactured item, and the planned order is a subassembly item or raw materials. So looking at this, the first thing I would want to do is filter some of it, so I could filter by product code. Maybe I'm working on only specific product codes. Maybe if you have plenty of, several planners in the organization, you would want to, separate it by planner. So let's say I was Mike and I wanted to choose Mike. As soon as I click on that filter, now I'm only seeing Mike's or orders or jobs or parts rather, where Mike is the planner. Same thing with buyer. So that's just another way of separating this out. So, if I choose Skip, you can see Skip's not associated with any items, and Suda is. Okay, but I'm just going to run it by all for now. And then I would choose over here. For example, if I'm working on purchasing right now, or if it's a separate role altogether, I would only choose purchased items. So clicking that shows me only my purchased items. And then, of course, my options for work orders grays out because I'm not working with work orders anymore. Now it knows that I'm only working with purchase orders, so I can choose some rules with how I want to create the purchase orders or turn these planned orders into released purchase orders. I could use the next number in sequence, which is what 99% of folks are going to do. Or you can, if you wanted that purchase order to have a date as the purchase order ID, you can certainly do that too. And the rules: consolidate orders by vendor. So I can see I have different vendors listed on here, and as I go through and select all the planned orders that I want to release and turn into purchase orders, doesn't matter if I select multiple lines with different vendors. It's going to combine everything. So all of this Nashua iron supply up to here, and then you can see I had Hookset steel in the middle, and then I have Nashua iron supply again. It doesn't matter. It'll know to include this line item here in the same purchase order with these. So that's what that option is doing for us. It's allowing us to consolidate everything we choose into one purchase order by vendor. And making delivery schedules. For example, you could have the same item here. This is a good example here. It's the same item that has looks like 7 or 8 different discrete demands for it. And you could choose to put that all on a purchase order and have it all come in either as separate line items for the dates that they're due, and in this case it's a bad example because they're all due on the same date, so it really doesn't matter. Or you can make delivery schedules, because in a normal environment you would see different dates for when they were wanted for the different demands. So you could set a delivery schedule and say, well, I don't want it all at once. I want to get my quantity break by ordering it all. I want to combine them all as a total order, but I want them delivered on different dates and have that broken up. So you have that option to do that also. But the real nice thing about this also is if I wanted to just like place a purchase order or just concentrate on a specific vendor, I could just click my sort by vendor ID button. So now it is sorted by vendor, and I could tell that, I need to, I have some items here that I never identified a vendor for, so I would have to add which vendor I want to buy those from, but everything else defaults to what I set my primary vendor up to. But, at any given time, I can certainly change that if I wanted to. But here, this allows me to do something like, for Arrow Electronics, for example, I can choose all of my Arrow Electronics lines and say, yep, I want to place that purchase order, and just hit my order button. So now it's going through and it's placing it, and you can see my PO number 30084 that it created for all of these, and it's adding all of those different items onto that one purchase order. And when I say OK here, it's going to drop them off the list. So now I still have my to-do list with everything left that I still haven't reacted to. And of course I have a lot of different information here, release dates, and you could tell my demo database still has some old data in here, so it's going back in the past. But I can see, what my quantity currently is on hand, projected availability, meaning, what's the total net of my demand and supply. And I can see safety stock quantities because, I might be evaluating this and realize that, well, the reason it's telling me I need it is because of safety stock, and I might decide to skip those for now and just go for where I have actual demand. But same thing with fabricated, which is work orders. I would go through this the same way and choose which work orders I want to release, and just select which ones I want to create actual work orders for. I'm not going to select a lot. I'm just going to select a few here and say order. And it's going to do the same thing. And it's also letting me know that there's this is a good example of ECNs. I have an engineering change control notice, which we also have in Visual, set to that particular item. So it's not going to allow me to copy it unless I gave it the ability to overwrite that. I'm going to say no. I don't want to overwrite that one. So that's all it does, is drops those off the list, and I still have my working list for firmed orders. So that's a very generic overview of how easy you can come in and create purchase orders in mass and job orders or work orders in mass, and apply different logic to it for how you want those orders to be created. But makes it really easy with the planning system to be able to do that and concentrate just on the things that should be released today or this week or within a certain time frame that you want to do that in. Okay, now looking at scheduling. Since our scheduler did run overnight, the first thing I like to do is look at my scheduling window to get an overall view of what's going on the factory floor. Looking over on the left side here, I could see my my different resources, and these white little markers represent units of capacity. And then I have up top my shifts, 1, 2, and 3. So first shift, second shift, third shift, and if I look at these, I can tell, like this Amistar Axial, for example, I have 1, 2, 3 of those machines. So I have 3 units, and both of those run for 2 shifts. which is represented by these white areas of capacity on my schedule. And the gray areas are off time. So that would be that third shift that it's not running. And it could be weekends and so on. But it gives you a really good visual display of your factory floor and how many resources you're currently using. The nice thing about this is what you can tell that I do have different colors out here. Red representing things that or operations that are late already, and blue is on time. So I can tell just by looking at this that I probably have well, more than half of my jobs are late, which is not what I necessarily like to see, but you know, it's a demo database, so I'll survive. But what this does is it gives me a good visibility of capacity before I start looking into other things like constraints and bottlenecks. You know, looking at my cutoff saw, for example, I don't have a lot of white space in there, so you know, I am using most of that capacity up, and it shows that it's pretty full. The other thing I can do looking at this is I have alternate schedules, and when my scheduling runs overnight, I can actually tell it, you know what, run my standard schedule, but also run a schedule that assumes infinite capacity. I have mine set up to run finite capacity by default, which means, you know, you can only schedule 8 hours of work in a resource that has 8 hours of capacity, whereas infinite will schedule as much work as can be scheduled in that 8 hours of capacity. So you could, you know, potentially have 24 hours of work scheduled in that in that 8 hour capacity bucket. And really what happens is, of course, you can't run 24 hours, but it leaves it up to the shop foreman or supervisor to decide which of those 3 jobs goes in it, because you can only run one, assuming that they all took 8 hours, of course. But if I wanted to compare something like that, I can easily say load my infinite schedule. And the infinite schedule is just one of many what-if schedules that I can have. I can have what-if schedules that represent, you know, hey, what if I ran overtime on the weekends? What if I got another machine in this area? So you could run what-ifs like that and see what result it has to your schedule. So now you can see that the green, or the slightly green shaded markers represent my infinite capacity, which now you can see the difference. On my finite capacity, it would schedule one operation after the other, and it wouldn't put any on top of each other. In infinite capacity, it's showing that, hey, we're trying to schedule all of these at the same time, even though we don't really have capacity for it here. So that's where you would decide, hey, you know, it looks like if I added another machine here or another couple of machines, you know, what would happen? If I added overtime, you know, what would happen? But it gives you a good indicator of where my bottlenecks might be and what kind of capacity I might need to add, whether you physically add machines, people, or extend hours or shifts. But lots you can do with that, and lots of ways that you can mimic different what-if schedules and see it all here on the screen to do some comparisons. The next really good feature that we have is something called the throughput window. And this gives us really good information. We're not going to go through all of these, but we're just going to concentrate on a few of these quickly. Like, for example, it's using scheduling functionality, but it's actually calculating dollar values also. So something like the customer service impact inquiry, what this is doing is it's not only looking at my schedule through the shop floor, but it's also looking at what the value of those items that are being produced are related to the actual customer orders that we have. And I can compare, these are all my different schedules that I have, and they're what-ifs. The standard is my real schedule, and the rest of them are all different what-if schedules that I've created for my site. And I'm in the multi-site database. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But my standard schedule here, I can see, you know, that I have most everything is past due, and then I have, you know, some things on 1030 that are being impacted. But if I click on one of these, I can see the detail behind it. So I can see the customer and the customer order that is being impacted by it, and what the what's happening with it throughout the schedule. And really, what's important here is I'm looking at the value that's late. I'd probably be interested in doing something about this. I have $103,000 worth of an order out there that is late, and what can I do to get that through the shop and shipped to make my monthly goal, perhaps. So great information to be able to evaluate things like that. We also have something called contention, which allows us to look at what the bottlenecks within the schedule are. We want to do something about those bottlenecks if they're impacting long-term on us, whether it's increasing capacity or people or whatever the case is. But this is a great place to start to see where we can affect that. For example, my cutoff saw is my biggest bottleneck according to this. Again, if I click on it, I can see what all work orders are scheduled to go through that are causing those delays throughout my schedule, and what the impact of that is. So it's a great place to start to, without having to go out on the shop floor and look for piles in front of machines. You can certainly look at this, and it's telling you, where those piles should be, because it's showing you which resources are impacting the schedule the most. And of course, if you fix one, then you created a new bottleneck somewhere, right? So after you correct one or do some what ifs to see, what if I changed this? Does it get me through with more throughput, or did I just put the bottleneck somewhere else and I'm still not going any faster through the shop? And that's where Visual really has a big impact, because it allows you to make sure that you're not trying to fix a bottleneck that's not going to impact the end result anyway, because all you're doing is pushing that bottleneck further down the line somewhere. Same thing with materials. Materials are constraints just like resources. So, if I don't have materials in stock, whether they're long lead times or whatever the case is, I can see which materials are causing me the biggest delays according to my schedule. So I can drill into that and see, what work orders are being impacted by certain materials not being here, and what that impact is. So great information. There's lots of other really good stuff that I can evaluate here, but from a high-level overview, those are the ones that get used the most and can really be a game changer. Let's take a look now at Visual Shop Floor Mobile. Shop Floor Mobile provides the shop floor users with an easy interface to be able to collect labor transactions and material transactions. It also allows the supervisors to analyze those transactions to keep that data as accurate as possible. So let's open up our Shop Floor Mobile, and now we're putting our hats on for the folks out on the floor, where the actual operators doing the work on the floor at each operation. Where the material handlers issuing materials to the jobs. You can see that the Shop Floor Mobile program is a web-based format, which allows you to run this on any device that has an internet connection out on the floor. So it's really designed to be touchscreen and mobile friendly. So as you change the size of the device, you can change how it looks and how the buttons work on it. So as you get smaller, whether it's on a tablet or on a phone even, you could still use it and get to the information. We're going to just run it on the PC for now. But the first thing we would do from a scheduling standpoint, I'm going to click on my scheduling button, and this gives us a lot of good information. It shows us all of our resources. And I have this grouped so I can create different views for different resources that I want to see. Perhaps you have different people in charge of different departments, and they want to be able to, just see the jobs or work orders coming through their department. So you can set up all of the resources in a particular department based on a shop view. Or you can look at, you can have a view that shows everything. So just looking at this, we have our brake CNC. I'm going to look at the cutoff saw, because if you remember earlier, we looked and saw that was a bottleneck according to our throughput information. So if I click on that, it shows me all of my different jobs scheduled in order based on what the schedule said the order is that you're supposed to do it in. And, normally I would work in this order. You could see the little numbers on there because this is where it gives the scheduler or the shop foreman a lot of capability to manipulate the schedule that came out. So whether you're running a finite or an infinite schedule, you still have control over what the folks on the shop are going to see and the order that they may want to work. For example, what that one is, that's a priority. I can come over here and I can say maybe this maple table leg is a different priority. So maybe I want to set that to like a priority 3. So you can see now that I have a 3, and you can see I have a priority 1, I have a priority 3, and a priority 2 out here. And the other thing I can do here is, even though I have priorities, they stay where the schedule put them. So it's just right now it's just a recommendation that these are a higher priority. But if you truly wanted the folks out on the floor to see these in that order, I could move things around. I could just grab, an operation and move it to where I want it. So I can put these in the order that I might want to see these in. So now I have them in 1, 2, 3, or maybe I have 3 or 4 ones. There comes a point of diminishing returns if everything has a higher priority, though. So, but you do have the ability to move things around, and it doesn't have to have a priority. I can move things that don't have any priority around on my schedule too. So in times of rush that I want to make sure that these jobs are being done in the order that I want them done in, I can just move them in order. So there's one of 2 ways that you can work on this now from a labor standpoint. Is the labor person could use this same screen, and maybe they don't have the right to move things around, but they can still come to this screen from a paperless standpoint because it doesn't require any traveler with any barcodes or anything. And they could just come in and submit, and that'll actually create a time ticket for them. And then when they're done, they would just close a time ticket and tell it how many they did. But the nice thing about this also is these indicators that you have here. So I could tell with the red clock there with the exclamation point that operation is late. I can see the green material card saying that I do have material for it, so material's not a problem. I can see this saying that it is available from the previous operation, and I can see that someone's logged in on it by the plus with the head on there. So it gives me good information, and I can see that I have some documents associated with it. So from a user standpoint and a scheduling standpoint, I can see a lot of information about these particular jobs. I'm just going to go back to the beginning now, because here's another way we would do it as a laborer, that maybe the scheduler already manipulated those around, or he just left it as it is. He doesn't have to change anything. But my labor person's going to come in. They're going to, and it defaults based on who I logged in as, and lets me know I'm not clocked in yet. So the first thing I do in the day when I come in is I clock in, and it puts me on an indirect transaction until I start a job, and it's asking me what I want to do. So let's say I am going to just do a run. So I'm going to start a run, and it's going to ask me to tell it what I am running. And here I have this set up where I told it I'm just going to type this information in. But the reality is, if I had a barcode scanner, if I was using this with a scanner, I could put it in scan mode. And then when I do a start run, all it wants me to do is scan that barcode traveler, and it's one barcode that will fill in all of this information. So as that traveler comes to me, I just scan it, boom, it puts me on that job, and then I come back later and stop the job when I'm done. And then at the end of the day, I clock out, and the system's going to track all of that time for me. Okay, the other thing that we would do is work order materials. So from a material handler standpoint, this is where a material handler probably has a device that they're doing scanning on. It's an RF device possibly, or whatever the case. So they're going to run it from a screen that might look like this because they're running around with that smaller device. And of course, this could shrink down smaller. I'm just doing this so we can see it on the demo here. So I can issue to a work order if I am, working off of a pick list that came with the job. So I'm walking through the warehouse with that pick list, and I'm scanning the pick list when I go and grab those items for that particular job. And what I am going to do here is just take off that scan mode so I can see the search functionality here. So without scan mode, normally you would use scan mode with a device like this, but without it, it allows me to go ahead and search for different jobs that I have out there. And here's that 3000 that we were looking at earlier. And then I can say, well, show me the piece numbers. There's the bearing that was on that particular one. So all I do is choose what I want and go ahead and submit it, and that will issue that material to that job. If I had any pictures or documents related to it, I could see that here also. Now, that is grabbing one by one with a pick list. I could also do an issue by exception, meaning issue all of the jobs in one spot. Now, generally, wouldn't require a scanner. You're doing this on a computer where you're saying, hey, I'm just gonna issue all of these materials. I'm not gonna go and scan every one of them. We're gonna assume that we have them all, and we're gonna issue them all. So I'm gonna just make my screen bigger. And here's where you would go out and grab the product that you're working on. And let me try to find one that has a little more information on it, possibly. Let's see this desk model. Yep. So here's where I could see all of the materials for that particular operation that I entered in, and I would choose here either, I could still pick one at a time if I wanted to, or I could just say issue all. Now in this example, these are actually already issued because I could see my issue quantity is 0 on those, and 100, they've all been issued already. So I can issue all if they were all available to issue, or I can still go one by one, give it a quantity, and go ahead and submit that. The submit would light up if I had a quantity in there. But really easy for the warehouse personnel to be able to use, whether they're scanning or whether they're issuing all at once. And then, of course, I have a lot of other functionality that I could use from a warehouse standpoint. The last thing we want to cover is what we call our dashboard analytics. And this is completely personalizable to choose from a group of analytics that already exists, or if there's some that don't exist, you can actually create your own analytics. But here I chose the things that I think are most important to me, and as you can see, these are live, so I can move the slider around to see different criteria or filtering with it. But the nice thing about these is that there's data behind all of these. So for example, my delivery performance, if I want to click on a certain piece of data, I can see what data is behind that particular analytic and dig into it. And of course, it has the shortcuts to be able to drill to specific data. I could drill to the pack list, to the customer order, and so on. So that's a really nice way to see it first graphically, and then of course be able to drill in and get to the detail level of what's behind that chart or analytic. Just as an example, one of my favorites, however, is this here, this work order estimated versus projected detail. This is a great analytic because it shows me variances, and I have this sorted by my variance, worst to best, because I really want to be able to track all of my orders out there. And here I'm looking at both closed and released. I can set it up so that I'm only looking at maybe released orders or firm then released. But I like looking at closed too, because I want to make sure that I'm evaluating where a job may have had a big variance so that we can correct it. Where our times and materials wrong on that work order when we created, or the engineering master. Do we need to fix that? Was it a one-time only thing that, we really don't have to worry about fixing it? We'll just take a loss on it. So, having that ability to see something with a variance and then being able to drill into that order, and I can see that this order is completed correctly, but now I can drill in and look at the actual costs and drill into why I had such a large variance on that, and I can analyze this. So great analytical tools with these dashboards, and they really come in handy in a great way to evaluate all of the data that you're collecting. And now I'd like to look at my dashboard. And the dashboard's a great tool to be able to put your analytics that matter most to you. There's a list of analytics you can choose from to design and personalize your own dashboard and which metrics you want to see. If there are metrics that don't exist that you'd like to see, you have the ability to create your own custom analytics and metrics and add them to your dashboard. But the nice thing about this is these are live pieces of data, so I can drag my slider to see different pieces of information. The other nice thing about this is that there's actually data behind these charts. So, visually I can see what it looks like from a trend analysis, but I can dig into it and just click on it and see the detail behind it. And then I can drill further into it because each of these has a source record behind it. So if I'm looking at my open accounts receivable as an example, maybe I want to go directly to that invoice. I can just click on the button there and go right into that actual invoice. My favorite analytic on here, however, is this work order estimated versus projected detail. Because as we're capturing labor tickets and material issues to our work orders, we're capturing all of that actual cost, and we want to compare it to what our estimated cost was of what we generated that original work order or engineering master from. And here's where we can see that, and it's easy to find. Everything in red is where I had a negative variance, which is something I want to look at. Maybe I'll ignore a 16 cents variance, but maybe I want to sort this by variance amount, and I don't want to see a big positive variance, although that would be important too on a closed order, because that tells me that perhaps someone didn't report labor or didn't issue the materials, and I might want to look into that. But if I'm looking at my negative variances, I just click on that again to sort it descending, and now I can dig through it. So now I can go into these orders, whether they're closed or released. And from a production standpoint, released is very good because I can see that I have a variance on a job that's already in process, and I can go and see, can I affect the outcome of that? Can I help with that variance before the job is even complete? I know that I have a variance and it's not done yet, or I can evaluate closed. I can also change this so I'm only looking at certain releases, so I can filter that. But I like looking at all of them because closed job is just as important. I might need to fix my standards. Maybe my operation times or my setup times were wrong, or my materials costs were wrong. So I want to evaluate those. But the nice thing is, to do that, I simply just open up that shortcut to drill into it, and I can see that this is a completed work order that has everything with a full status bar across, tells me it's all done. I can dig into the costs of that and evaluate why I have such a large variance, and I can see that a lot of it is in the testing cycle, and I can dig into that and find out why did it take so much more time than I thought. So great tools with these dashboards, and being able to personalize and build your own dashboard to show the analytics that are important to you. As you can see, Infor VISUAL ERP is easy to use and makes the data readily available for you in the manufacturing and operations process. If you want to see more, contact us at visualsouth.com or check the link below.